Uh, yeah, I think I'm in, Derek.
Yes.
Hey, Derek, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, so
Good
all clear,
morning.
right?
Yes, good morning.
Or should I say good evening to you?
No, it's morning. It's 3 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
All right.
hi
So
everyone.
great. We have almost a full house. So there's 10 of us
Mhm.
here. Before I introduce Mr. Gino formally to the session, so that he takes over the mic, I'd just like us to go over the room and everybody can just introduce themselves, probably the location where they are, so that, yeah, we will record the session, Gino, if that's okay. A lot of our comrades, because of time, can't make it, and we really want them to, get to learn and be inspired by it as well. Is that okay?
Go easier.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Great. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over the names and then you unmute yourself and introduce or unmute and introduce yourselves. So we have Comrade Awasi from Cape Town. Dr. Awasi, please.
Good morning, everyone, and a special welcome to our guests. I am currently the country coordinator for Ambazona, South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Awasi. We have Dr. Charles Agbo from the UK. Dr. Charles.
Yeah, hi everyone. Charles Agbo from the UK. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. We have Dr. Gwambe from here in the US. Comrade Dr.
Yeah,
Gwambe.
good morning, Comrade Derek, and good morning to our special guest, and good morning to my fellow Amazonians here present. I'm in Los Angeles, and it is 12 midnight over here, but this was a very important meeting, and I felt it extremely necessary to come in and listen in and learn from our guests and learn from all of you. So I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for joining. We have Raymond. Comrade Raymond. Ray, are you there? I know that Ray was on his way to the airport. Probably he can't speak right now. Comrade Julius, please, if you can unmute and just say hello. Maybe the comrade is not. We have Comrade
Hello?
Sufri. Yeah, Comrade
Hello?
Julius. Comrade Julius.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Comrade Derek. This is Julius Nde from Hamburg, in Germany.
Oh, thank you.
I-
Thank you for
yes,
joining. Thank you
yes,
for joining, Comrade.
I'm the vice chairperson of the Southern Cameroon Committee here in Hamburg.
Thank you.
It's my
Thank you.
pleasure to be around. Thank you.
Thank you for joining and wonderful work you comrades are doing. You're doing over there in Germany with mobilizing the community. We have Comrade
Yeah.
Sufri Cletus.
Yeah, good morning, comrades. Good morning, Gino.
Good
This is
morning.
Comrade Sophie, the spokesperson and resource mobilization here in South Africa, Johannesburg. It's a pleasure to be part of the meeting. We look forward to learning a lot from you and also to engage. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you. I see Comrade Dabney Yerima, VP, has just joined. VP, you want to greet the house, and then Comrade Milton, then Comrade Hillary and Comrade Milton. Then I will introduce Gino so that he starts the session formally.
Good morning, Comrade Derek. Good morning, Dr. Akbar, Comrade Sufri. I hear Comrade Milton is here. I want to thank you guys for coming. to learn so that we can restructure our revolution. And I also want to, especially on our behalf, thank Comrade Derek for this initiative, and also the willingness of Comrade Gino to voluntarily come to teach us about revolution. I look at this to be a lecture. So there are lots of lessons that we are going to learn. And I thank you so much. I see that it's your empathy for our people that you can create this time to share your experience with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Comrade Hillary, Dr. Hillary, that's Dr. Hillary. It's been a while. We haven't chatted. Please say hello.
Good morning, Derek, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, it has been a very long time. My name is Hillary. I used to be in Cape Town, but for almost 2 years now, I have moved inland. I'm in Bloemfontein now. Been a part of this journey from the beginning, and thankfully looks like we are restructuring. So I'm glad to be here, and greetings to Gino.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade, for joining in. It's always great, having these chats with you. Comrade GA, if you can introduce yourself. But if not, comrades, anyone that hasn't introduced themselves yet, I'm just going to let Comrade Milton to introduce himself, and then I'll open with just introducing Gino to the session formally so that he takes over. And as comrades come in, the chat forum would be open. Questions can be asked in the chat forum. Then when Gino is done with his presentation, we can take some of those questions and engage with him on that. So I'll hand over Comrade Milton. Please, you introduce yourself and just our community, and then I'll introduce Gino and he will get into the session.
Good morning, comrades. Good morning, comrade Gino, and thank you so much for making time to come address us. Milton Taka, an Amazonian activist based in Johannesburg.
Awesome. All right, comrades, colleagues, guardians of the struggle. Today is just not another meeting. Today is a sacred exchange of wisdom. We stand on the soldiers of giants, those who have fought before us, those who have sacrificed everything so that we might taste freedom. In this room, virtual as it may be, we are blessed to welcome one of those giants. Gino Govender needs no introduction when it comes to the social justice movement, but history demands that we honor the journey of his journey, a soldier of the South African liberation movement, a strategist who have turned protest into power, a negotiator who sits tables across the oppressors and have won, a mentor who continues to guide movements across the world, and yet, as you would soon witness, a comrade so humble, he will introduce himself as just an ordinary person. But we know better. Ordinary people didn't dismantle apartheid. Ordinary people didn't build people power. That topples regimes. Ordinary people don't show up decades later and still whisper hope to the next generation of freedom fighters. That, comrades, is what makes this moment extraordinary for me. Gino agreed to walk us through an unwritten manual of liberation, real strategies that don't make it into history books, the mistakes, the breakthroughs, the alliances that changed everything. This is our chance to ask, how did they sustain the spirit of resistance when almost all seemed lost? This is our chance, to engage with somebody who has walked the talk, who has been in struggles, make mistakes, seen how all these things happen in front of him, and At the end of the day, like we all know, they succeeded in their struggle, but not without challenges. So we'll hear from him, in person, and also we'll hear how we can, the Southern Cameroonian movement, apply some of these lessons. So, comrades, let's not listen as students, but be successors, not as spectators, but be the next architects of liberation. Gino, thank you again for joining us. You are so kind. The mic is all yours now. We would listen, and when you are done with your presentation, we'll then engage with questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Comrade Derek. Really, you are the kind one, Yeah, and really, I must just say that, just listening to all the comrades in the room introducing themselves, I would say that your emails belie who you are. So really, it's such it's a deep, deep, deep honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. I must say that, and that comes totally from the bottom of my heart. From a Cameroonian perspective, when South Africans, when we look at Cameroon, there's just a few things come to mind, And the first one, of course, is Roger Miller, who put the country on the global map, when, of course, at the corner flag, dancing. They introduced, I would say, whether you can call it the samba or a special dance from Cameroon, that lit up the world. And of course, there's Samuel Eto'o, and I remember my young son, when we were in Brussels many years ago, he wore his Samuel Eto'o Barcelona shirt till it tore. So I would say thank you for all that you have done to put Africa on the map, comrades. Really, from my side, it's really a privilege to be with you. And the reason why I agreed immediately, Derek, is that currently, amongst other things that I do, I'll come back to my input right now, is that I'm working with youngsters from the DRC, from Syria, from Palestine, from Ukraine, from Bangladesh, Haiti, most of the conflict zones, the hotspots, that is. Of course, there are many conflicts in the world. And it's so wonderful to connect with people and to learn and to share. And this is the way of, being a kind of, a global citizen. And that is, you are constantly learning about different struggles across the world and the nature of those struggles, who's involved in those struggles, how do those struggles come about, and how we can connect and support each other. That's the first thing. Secondly is that, many years ago, it was 2011, in South Africa, many of us and myself and a few others came together and assembled many organizations, including the Africa Diaspora Forum, by the way, that was based in Yeovil at the time. Mark Bafo, he was from Cote d'Ivoire. He was the president of the ADF in South Africa at the time. We created something called the South Africa Forum for International Solidarity, comrades. And that was really a kind of an alliance, if you like, that sought to use South Africa as a base. And if you remember at that time, in 2011, South Africa was part of the, voted by Africa, that is, part of the UN Security Council. So what we wanted to do then was to use South Africa as the base to launch international solidarity actions with other countries. At that time, Swaziland was the hotspot in Africa, Swatini now. But the main thing was that part of what we felt as South Africa was to repay something we call the international solidarity debt. That is, to thank and to give thanks and to return the solidarity that we experience, not just from our fellow brothers and sisters in Africa, but in different parts of the world, particularly Asia and Latin America, what we refer to as the global South. So that's the reason why it was very, I found it very easy to agree, because of the importance of the kind of discussions we could have, number one, but very important is the kind of connections that we could build. You know, South Africa, at the moment, Palestine is of course, not just Palestine, but also the Eastern DRC is occupying a lot, you know, of the kind of foreign policy work. But of course, with the G20 coming, there's lots of opportunities to raise the flags of different countries. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, cheers, bye. That's my wife saying goodbye. She's going to work. She's at Wits University. Yeah, so there's, yeah, from a context perspective, there's lots of opportunities for us to bring in people from so many different parts of the world and to connect with each other. So the fact that we connected with each other, Comrade Derek, and you are connecting me with your fellow activists from all parts of Germany, the UK, the US, and of course here in South Africa, really, it's a pleasure. You know, the thing about it is, in thinking about, you know, what to say without it being turned into a lecture as such, you know, from my side, let me start with me. You know, we as a young boy, I was born in a certain part of Durban, and yeah, I lived with my grandparents. My mother was she just had 2 years of schooling, but she ran a fruit and vegetable business in town, in the market. My grandfather was a football administrator. He was deaf, but he was very good with the typing. He was like a kind of sort of community servant. He did a lot of work exposing the ills of apartheid, then particularly what was known as the Group Areas Act. Right, and then our area, Mayville, was declared an area for white people, and we were given notice to move, and we were moved 35 kilometers south of Durban to a township called Chatsworth, and that's where I grew up in Chatsworth from the age of 7. And the thing about it is, my father, who was an unqualified teacher, when we were in Mayville, he could get onto a bus, and 2 stops later, he could jump off literally by his school. And he earned, I think it was £35 a week. But being relocated 35 kilometers away, he could not afford to travel every day to the school. And as a result, he had to resign being a teacher. And the reason why they appointed him a teacher, it was because he was a sports master. And he was good in sports. He loved football and all of that. And of course, they made him a sports master as a teacher. But he had to resign. And my father had to seek work. And the next work he got was as a laborer. And that, in a sense, broke him. And I tell this story is because we come out of working class families. We were directly affected by the apartheid system. And as a young boy, when I started questioning and I asked my parents, why did this happen, and so on, what I discovered from my parents is the fear that the apartheid system instilled in the elders. And my dad would say, you must be careful. You must not talk politics. You must not get involved because they will put you in jail. That's the fear the system put into the elders. And of course, if you are a parent, if you know that you are working and you are living under an oppressive regime, and if your kids start to question and question the politics of the day, question the logic of the governing authority of the day, then as a parent, your immediate response is one of protection for your kids. And that's what I remember as a young boy. And I still can remember it today, is because that, in a sense, was the formative stage of my of my youth, as it were. My father wanted me to become a teacher. I wanted to be a worker. I came to what was then known as the Transvaal College of Education to study teaching. I got involved in the Students' Representative Council. 16 June 1976, we were on the train passing Soweto when the students came, and they entered the coach and they said, Amandla. We said, where to? And they let us move. And when we got to campus in town, we realized what was happening in Soweto. And the struggle then was, the students of Soweto was a struggle against Bantu education, the imposition of Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor. as the medium of teaching in Black schools. But for the rest of us, we were fighting for autonomous students' representative council and not the ones appointed by the authorities, as it were. Anyway, through those politics, I was kicked out of college together with my fellow student leaders. I had to go back into the township and begin organizing. And that's where the kind of politicization, in fact, actually, the first books that we had access to were the books that came from the Black Panther Party in America. Aldrich Cleaver, Huey Newton. Those were the kind of books we saw what the Black Panther Party was doing to build clinics and schools and so on in Black communities in the US. And that was the inspiration to set up something called Chatsworth Community Projects. And that's, that's sort of how in my formative years started doing what we called community work. And then in 1980, I was formally recruited into the underground of the African National Congress. I went to Swaziland as a tourist. I spent 2 weeks with my political commissars getting inducted, writing my biography, and they gave me the name Clive. And thereafter, my name in the ANC was Clive. As it so happens, I qualify for a veteran's pension, but I never applied for the veteran's pension as yet, to the dismay of my fellow comrades in the ANC. Anyway, so that's sort of a little bit about my personal thing. Coming back, when we look at history, part of the first point I wanted to say is that it's a continuous process. I don't know, Derek, should I pause there? Are there any questions before I continue with the rest of my deliberation, my presentation? I'm in your hands, correct, Derek?
No, so far there is flow. I don't think there are questions as yet.
All right. Okay.
And comrades,
So
as Gino goes on, if there's a question, it would be best to just pop the question in on the chat box. Then, as he's presenting, he would, see the chat board, or when he asks, if there's a question, I'll just read from the chat board, so we don't interrupt his thoughts.
And allow me just to add to say, as Gino goes on, we're really connecting. Gino, for instance, we talked about being moved out of your house and your parents being scared. We're connecting with that. Please proceed.
Okay. Yeah, it's the story. It's the typical story, Comrade Milton, of working class families, right? That if you're the eldest son, for example, you have to go to work, and your parents are more relaxed when you are, when from Monday to Friday you are going to work and you're not messing around and becoming a thug in the townships, right? Because that was very easy to happen in the townships. But okay, anyway, so I go back into the townships and we start something called Chatsworth Community Projects. And through that kind of work, I got exposed to then in Durban, comrades who were very active in the Black consciousness movement. I used to go to town on a Saturday mornings. They had the Abangani classes where kids from the townships used to come and they used to do sort of extra lessons and stuff like that. And of course, that was also part of my sort of learning more about what was happening politically. And of course, information. Many people were banned, so you couldn't meet. Lots of literature was banned. So information was stifled by the apartheid regime. If you were caught in possession of political literature, then of course you were put in jail. You could get a minimum of 5 years. So information was not forthcoming. We had to seek information. And what was happening at that time in my township is that people from the ANC were watching all of us. These were ANC cadres. They were watching me, and I was approached in 1980 as to consider joining the ANC. And of course, for me as a young boy, I was just 21 years old. It was an honor to be called to join the movement. I didn't land up in Swaziland. I had to go. Everything was organized, and I went and I formally joined the ANC. And my role was intelligence and propaganda. At that time, in 1980, I was working for an American oil company. In South Africa, it was called Caltex. Today, it's called Chevron. It's been bought. And that's where I started. And Caltex was in a national key point. So even though I was a member of the ANC, I had to have a special clearance from the South African Defence Force. Every morning when you go through the checkpoint, you show your police your police clearance. They will allow you in. On the way back, they will search your vehicles and so on. So, but yeah, I mean, my role was intelligence, propaganda, and of course discipline, right? And my, those were in my unit. The other was from the Navy. He was a seaman in the Navy. Again, very strategic sort of position inside the beast of apartheid. But we were all in and the third member of the unit was a librarian working for the city of Durban. Libraries, we were just three. And then the one left, and there were just two of us remaining. If we look at the ANC, and if we look at the history of the ANC, we speak about in South Africa, going back many centuries, we speak about, even before liberation, we speak about 350 years of struggle. And there have been books where researchers have delved into that struggle. The first one, of course, was the kind of the struggles between the San in the Western Cape and the Dutch. The second one's being, the struggles between the British settlers and in the Eastern Cape, and of course, moving on to Port Natal. So our struggle has been, in a sense, a continuation, right, of many different struggles, and these were, of course, were what is known as the wars of dispossession. So the colonial powers came, and of course the Dutch wanted to. They did capture the Cape Colony. The British captured the eastern part of South Africa. So these wars of dispossession were met with resistance. The first prisoners of Robben Island were the chiefs of the Khoi that fought the resistance, Chief Makanda and so on. There were many of these battles, right? And of course, when the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910, the ANC was formed immediately thereafter, 1912. And the history goes on. The thing about the ANC, for many years, it was the African National Congress. We had Gandhi who came, and of course, Gandhi was a victim of British racism in Natal. Gandhi created in 1894, he created the Natal Indian Congress. In the Cape, we had the Colored People's Congress. Progressive white people created the Congress of Democrats. So in the 40s and the 50s, after the emergence of the National Party, when they came into power on the apartheid ticket to formalize apartheid and started instituting the cornerstones of apartheid, the Population Registration Act, when they call it mixed marriages, they were against mixed marriages. They banned intermarriages between different race groups, having sex and so on between race groups. You couldn't play sport together. And of course, was the Group Areas Act. They also had another act as part of their package to consolidate their power, which was the Suppression of Communism Act. And at that time, in response, the congresses I was telling you about earlier decided to go around the country and to ask people to create, and the question that people asked was, if you had to write the constitution for South Africa, what would you want to see in that constitution? And volunteers went around the country asking people. And the idea then was the Congress Alliance wanted a document that articulated the views of the people, an agenda, a people's agenda. And that all the demands were collated and were crafted into something that became known as the Freedom Charter that was adopted in 1955 in Cleveland. And the Freedom Charter
Looks like Gino is frozen there. Gino, are you there? I'm sure it's a network challenge. He will definitely read you. Or Gino, are you there?
Yeah, I think we got the things went blank. So yeah, first, I think the lesson of the ANC at that time was the fact that there were many different struggles being fought to create an alliance that could go through the length and breadth of the country, through every community in the country, and pose a question, and to consult them on what they would like to see if they wrote, the Constitution of New South Africa, was part and parcel of the defiance of the apartheid system, to be able to organize and to put together a set of ideas that represented an alternative to the apartheid system. The Freedom Charter, I think, was an act of an important act of resistance, but also it unified the various race groups in the country, right? And not soon thereafter, we had Sharpeville, people were protesting against the pass laws in the country. And of course, in the case of the pass laws, even though this was your country, you needed, the ridiculous of the apartheid system was that you needed a permit to be in your own country. And in Sharpeville, they burnt the pass laws. 69 people were murdered, shot mostly in the back. And that, of course, also was part of the resistance. And then came Mandela, setting up of course, the liberation. All the political parties, the trade unions were all banned. Many people were arrested. Many were driven into exile. And Mandela launched the undoing of the ANC. So that is a kind of brief history. And then the ANC went into a stage of rebuilding, if you like, from the launch of the apartheid, of the armed struggle, from the times of the bannings, the building the movement underground, going into exile. People like Oliver Tambo went around the world exposing the apartheid system, like what you're doing now, and then, of course, in the 70s, 1973 was another act of resistance in our country, where workers in Durban, they kind of went on strike to overthrow a toothless kind of system of works committees. They wanted independent unions. 1973, 1976 came the students' uprising. 1981, unions in South Africa, there were 33 unions, major unions came together in what was called unity talks. And those unity talks, 4 years later, led to the formation of COSATU. In 1983, many of the community-based organizations came together in Cape Town in August and created the United Democratic Front. And that became the basis. The labor movement, together with the United Democratic Front, became the basis of what became known as the mass democratic movement inside the country. So that was an important part of mobilizing people around their own demands, but linking local issues to the national question. And the national issue was the struggle, sort of for a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. And of course, after the strength of the mass democratic movement internally, the impact of the police firing on school kids still in their uniforms, all of that led to a kind of reawakening at the global level, and the formation, the consolidation, if you like, of international solidarity around the anti-apartheid movement. And yeah, in 1990, the ANC was banned. We were part of all the transition talks. In 1994, the ANC came into power, and now we are celebrating 30 years of democracy. And you see that once we get into power, we create the basis of a honeymoon. Then we get into normalization, and part of the kind of the democracy, if you like, is that we can have what we call political power, the right to vote, the freedom to move, civil rights as such. But fundamentally, in the case of South Africa, given the industrialization of South Africa, the rise of mining, of course, backed by mining finance capital, the rise of agriculture. You look at from a property relations, sort of economic relations in this country is still very much skewed in favor of the minority, right? And part of, all the attempts by the democratic state to liberalize the economy, to de-racialize the economy, is proving sort of difficult, and the pace is very, very slow, both in terms of ownership and control of the commanding heights of the economy on the one hand. On the other hand, if you look at land is still a very, very thorny issue, and I think you would have seen, sort of, the sort of the right-wing conservative lobby groups in South Africa, they're claiming to be victims when actually they are the victors. And you look at somebody like Trump trying to speak about, sort of taking up the plight of white Afrikaner farmers in this country, and of course, came off second best. So let me, in a sense, so I think I just wanted to say that the history of the democratic movement, the liberation movement, if you like, it was one of unity and struggle, that the struggle to build unity and to use unity to execute the struggle and to unite people across the political spectrum, across communities, around a banner of a united, non-racial, democratic South Africa, non-sexist democratic South Africa. And later on, of course, when, I just wanted to say that even in the run-up to our first democratic elections, there were many organizations and political movements inside the country that wanted their own little fiefdoms, that did not want South Africa to be one unitary state in which all of the people will enjoy equal rights. Each one wanted their own little kind of kingdoms and fiefdoms and so on. But of course, the fact that we have a constitution today that unites all of South Africa under one kind of supreme law, in which the values of, the principles of equality, of freedom, of dignity, of democracy are entrenched, I think is a victory in itself. And the ANC, notwithstanding, the declined support, of course, that is, the consequence, if you like, of a multi-party political system. But certainly the ANC many years ago agreed that if the one thing that they could take credit for was to be able to mobilize, unify the people, and to be able to play a leading role, if you like, in ridding the country of the apartheid system and then building the basis of a new democratic state. Derek, let me pause there. I think I've spoken enough, but I tried to sort of, again, the unity and struggle component was important. And I think the other part, certainly, in me coming from the so-called Indian community,
Can I have a question?
How did that?
Can I ask a question before it slips off my mind, please,
Yeah.
Gino?
Yeah, sorry, I was so again, coming from the so-called Indian community under apartheid, part of the move into the labor movement, if you like, was also to build non-racial unity on the shop floor. Because remember, the system of apartheid was, in addition to everything else, was divide and rule. So building non-racial unity on the shop floor, joining the labor movement as part of the underground, was also part of building a strong, united working class that could champion those rights. And Kusatu was one of the products of that kind of liberation struggle. Yeah, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Dr. Awasi, you have a question? Maybe that would help Gino.
Yes. I think I want to first of all thank you for this presentation. There are various lessons we can learn at various levels. But I want you to answer me on how, because you mentioned that when they moved towards the democratic elections in South Africa, it was difficult for all groups and all organizations to come together to form a democratic government. But you also made it clear that the Constitution was the overriding guiding instrument that was used to unite the people to form a single government. In the case of the Southern Cameroons, I immediately reflected how that we have various groups. The Southern Cameroons cause has various groups, and it's been also challenging to bring these groups under one banner to form a united front so that we can stand in and persecute in success. So I just want to, I know you are abreast of the facts of the Southern Cameroon cause. I just want you to maybe kind of guide us, give us an intro on how this division that has also weakened the Southern Cameroon cause can be persecuted, on which lines can we work in order to have a united front. Of course, when there's a united front, people speak with a strong voice.
Thank you, Dr. Awasi. So we will use a show of hands when we want to make an input, just so we have order. So Gino, there's one question. I don't know if you want to engage on that, or you want the other two comrades, Comrade Milton and Comrade Boni, to ask their questions, and then you can respond all at once.
Do you mind if I take Awasi's comments, Derek? Because I think that's it's a kind of fundamental, question about, the thing about, what Amilcar Cabral speaks about unity and struggle. And I try to allude to that. That is the idea of building unity. And Awasi, it was, our struggle was long and hard. The ANC is one of the oldest liberation movements in the world, and the thing about it is that, what I was speaking about, the fear that the apartheid system instilled on the elders, that if you were young, if you tried to do something, people say, be careful, they will put you in jail. So I'm saying, notwithstanding that fear, one of the best ways in which we could organize communities was around issues that were important to them. So if I went and knocked in my township, say, knock at the door, the woman opens up and say, hello, auntie, I'm here to talk about politics. They will tell you, please, we don't involved in politics. But if I spoke to them about, if I said, I'd like to speak to you about, the long grass, or maybe, the high rents or low wages or something like that, something that really affected them, they would say, come in, Sonny, let's have a chat, something like that. So that was the sort of, an important part of organizing was to take up issues that people felt dearly upon. And then thereafter, when you are taking up questions of high rents, low wages, or long grass, poor services, and stuff like that, then slowly but surely, through their own political education, if you like, through their own political experiences, they start to realize the root cause of these problems, right? So that was the one way of building unity. And of course, it was a long organizing process. And of course, it was painstaking. It took 4 years for the 33 unions to form COSATU. It took many, I think it would be at least from 1976 to 1979, building the mass sort of democratic movements inside the country for Alan Bussack to make the call for a United Democratic Front that was only launched in 1983. So these are kind of sort of, it's hard, it's painstaking work. You have to not confuse your militancy. That's something that we learned from the ANC. ANC taught us, never confuse your militancy with that of others. Go in, work with the people, walk with them, and in the end, people would lead their own struggles. And that is the kind of sort of the short answer, Awazi, to your question. So unity and struggle it's a struggle for unity, but that unity does not come about on paper. It comes through action, people coming forward, taking decisions, seeing victories, even on the shop floor, to unite workers from different racial sort of groups and backgrounds and so on. The one thing that united them was when there was a victory, they appreciated that victory as a united force. So delivering the goods, as it were, was an important part of winning people over to the struggle, because the apartheid system, they were everywhere. And even in our own communities, they had their collaborators, people that were against the resistance movements and so on. So we had to fight these struggles on many different fronts. But once we had the unity, or we had the semblance of unity, and we thought if we called a march, we would get quite a number of people. For example, in Durban, when we called a march, we did a lot of work before. Today, people call a march using WhatsApp groups. We never did that. If we thought we wanted to take action as the labor movement and something, we called people. We explained to them. And when we called people, people came to a meeting. There would have been 50 to 100 people in the meeting. We would explain to people what the problem was, what was the issue, how it affected workers, how it affected communities, what was the importance of taking action, what is the consequence of not taking action. The decision to take a march was taken in that meeting by everyone, and they went and organized. And I say in Durban, if we said we are planning a march of 500,000 people, and we only had 450,000, we would kick ourselves because we didn't do a good job. Our target was 500,000, not 450,000. So that was part of the democratic process. Today, if people want to have a march, they'll use a WhatsApp group. They don't see the importance of calling people and earning the leadership in a particular struggle. You just think, if I call you, we say, let's go and march on so-and-so, and we expect people just to accept our leadership and come to a march. And then we get angry when only 5 people turn up. So that's the thing about unity and struggle, Comrade Owasi.
Thank you. Thank you for that response, Gino. We'll take a follow-up question from Milton, a question from Comrade Milton, and then Comrade Boni.
Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, Comrade Gino. I'm just trying to do a reflection on the kind of conversations we had around the international community in 2016, 2017, and 2018. And at the time, you would hear our people would cry out to say, we're looking up to the African Union to help us. We're looking up to the United Nations to help us. If you get our rhetoric in the last 3 or so years, our people have completely abandoned all international institutions. We believe that we are on our own. We believe that they are of absolutely no use. So perhaps lessons from the ANC. How did the ANC, get to mobilize the international community, and eventually got countries like Australia, the United States, to be at the forefront of ensuring that apartheid ends? Thank you.
Okay. Should I take that, Derek?
Oh yeah, you can take that, or you want another question?
Let me very briefly again if you look at what happened in Morogoro, Tanzania, in 1969. This was at when the ANC, as I said, it was banned. Mandela and his comrades, the Rivonia trialists, were in prison. I mean, the apartheid system was on the ascendancy, and they were consolidating. They were evicting communities like us. So the period between 1960 and 1970 was a tough period for the resistance movement in the country. In Morogoro, 1969, at the ANC's conference, Morogoro in Tanzania, by the way, they adopted what became known as strategy and tactics. This is 1969. I was still in school by then. We only learned later what the strategy of the liberation struggle was all about. And the armed struggle was but one part of the struggle. The second part was to build the underground. And when you build the underground, it means you are able to penetrate, you are able to infiltrate, you are able to organize and so on effectively, because you do so out of sight of the enemy, as it were. Of course, if you get caught, then yeah, there are huge risks, right? But we were trained on how to protect ourselves in the underground. So building the underground was the second component of the struggle. The third was mass mobilization, is what I was alluding to earlier, that let people organize around their own. Our job as activists was to help people organize through self-help, through civic issues, taking up day-to-day, what we call bread and butter issues of the people. That was the third element. Building organization, mass organizations. And then the fourth element was international solidarity and, of course, isolating the apartheid regime. That was the four pillars of the struggle, Comrade Milton. And all of these things worked in tandem, you know. Even armed struggle, you would not have at that time, the ANC encouraging people to shoot, white civilians, if you like. No, that was not the armed struggle was always in support of a political action, you know. Politically. So usually, it was in support. Never somebody who had an AK-47 thought that they were the leader of the struggle. No, that was not the case. So these were the four kind of pillars of the struggle that worked in tandem. Adopted in 1969, the fruits of that was only in the latter part of the 70s and the early part of the 80s that led to the internal sort of mass democratic movement, the defiance campaigns. We walked on, in Durban, we went to white-only hospitals, Black people went and said, we are here for treatment. We went to the white beaches, and of course, we made the apartheid system ungovernable, So that was the kind of the four pillars of the struggle working in tandem. In a Comrade Milton. So the international solidarity was one. And of course, the ANC in exile was very effective. We had a lot of support from, within Africa. But of course, we also had support from China. We had support from Russia. We had support from, countries in Southeast Asia, India, and so on, all of them taking action against the apartheid regime. And of course, as you would know, that, by resolution of the UN, apartheid was declared a crime against humanity. And that was one of the victories of not just our internal liberation movement, but also, with the support of, our supporters internationally. And once apartheid was declared a crime against humanity, then immediately we had. If you think about Palestine, when Mandela says, our freedom is incomplete unless the people of Palestine are free, there's lots of similarities between, settler colonialism, the struggle against settler colonialism, the dispossession of the people, taking their land, of course, the system of apartheid, where if you are Jewish, you have one laws applying to you, but if you are Arab, you are treated as a second-class citizen and so on. There are many kind of similarities there. So what we're seeing in South Africa playing itself in, historic Palestine. And that's where the international community is so important. But you are the leader. You have to lead the international community. You can't have the international community lead your struggle. They have to take action in support of your particular struggle. And I can just say in the labor movement, for example, where I come from, in the labor movement, if there was a dispute in an international company, let's say Cadbury's, we had our network, whether or Cadbury or VW, there were many, Colgate, Palmolive, there were many cases in which even before the workers went on strike, they alerted their counterparts in the labor movement in the home countries of those companies, and those workers were able to take solidarity action in support of workers in South Africa.
Awesome.
I hope I answered your question.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question from Mboni, Comrade Mboni. Please, if you can go ahead, and then Dr. Charles Akbo. Mboni, your question? Okay. We can, Dr. Charles, maybe you go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Mboni is here. Yeah, go ahead, Mboni.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you for this opportunity. I just want to give my question, which is just direct. My major question I want to ask is, can you like just explain to us how the leadership system or the structure, how did it really work or how it was organized? Like for instance, like power distribution and any leader who acted counter-revolutionary or infiltration within the leadership. So how were they able to deal with such threats? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, that's a very, very good question, comrades. And leadership is something that is derived, right? If you look at Mandela, Sisulu, Langeni, Slava, Katrada, all of them were inside prison, right? But outside of prison, and of course there were many other political activists that were imprisoned, that were languishing not only on Robben Island but in jails elsewhere in the country. I think what was important between 1976 and 1983, that through building the underground, number one, through mass mobilization, we were able to not only generate our own internal leadership in the country, but many of the leaders that were banned, uh, that couldn't participate in free political activity, we also gave them the energy. And inside in the country, we had people that had access to the leaders. We had people that had access to Cyril Ramaphosa, for example. He was a leader. He came out of the Soweto Civic Association, but he was also General Secretary of the Mine Workers. We had people like, and of course, there were lots of Cyrils in the country, by the way. And they sort of had the network to the leaders in Robben Island. They had, of course, the credibility with the leaders that were banned, and of course, that couldn't attend meetings. They had access to them. But more importantly, they also had access to Oliver Tambo in exile. And of course, Oliver Tambo. Jacob Zuma was the head of intelligence at that time inside the ANC. So the ANC was organized externally to provide the kind of support internally. We in the country, we had many visits to Harare, to Mozambique, to even Lusaka, where we were engaged with our comrades in exile. And we will talk and share ideas and so on. Of course, we had to do everything under very, very kind of sort of disciplined, regime. You had to, everything had to be carefully planned, orchestrated, and in the way that you came back into the country, you had to have an alibi that that you weren't sort of exposed or you weren't picked up by the apartheid system on your arrival back in the country. So that network was a very good network. We used to spend weekends engaged inside the mass democratic movement, talking a lot about, the state of our struggle, what we need to do next, and so on. And many of the leaders, many of them are in government today. We used to sleep in church, in dormitories, um, and spend the whole weekend just talking politics and what's next and what is the way forward and so on. And when we left those venues, we knew clearly what was the line of march and what we needed to do when we went back into our communities. So that was the kind of sort of network that we had access to not only to benefit from their wisdom, the collective wisdom of the leadership inside the country, but many, as I said, many of those comrades also had external sort of links, and they could share with us what the thinking, of our comrades in exile, or sometimes, what the Robben Islanders were thinking, and how, we could sort of work in unity. I hope that so the leadership, it was earned. It was not easy because constantly you were in the eyes of the state, but certainly it was a leadership that was credible. So that's on the side of the democratic movement. of course, as I said, we also had those leaders, they were collaborators with apartheid, and many of them were prepared to use any means necessary to curtail, the rise, if you like, and the dominance of the democratic movement. I come from KwaZulu-Natal, and in KwaZulu-Natal we had something called the IFP, and in 1986, the IFP, in concert with the apartheid state, unleashed, violence on communities, particularly in the Pietermaritzburg area and so on. So there was also, and what they called black on black violence. So there were also those internal dynamics that we had to face. But certainly through our organization, we were able to out-organize them often, yeah. Let me
All
pause
right.
there.
Thank you, Gino. There's another question from Dr. Charles.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hi. Thank you very much for the information you've given us about the struggles of the ANC. My question I needed to for you to help us answer is what can we do to make the Pan-African movement support our struggle in a much more meaningful way? Because they often think that we are just trying to further subdivide, the African argument. Whereas our struggle is against Franc-Afrique. For France has carved out several countries in West Africa and a lot in Central Africa as its market, and is trying to protect it using our own people. So we understand the wider argument of identity crisis. Yeah, we all inherited new identities during colonialism. Yeah, one of that identity is trying to impose on the other, and we are just like chip into the whole argument, the Franc-Afrique argument. So we have heard Thabo Mbeki said things about our struggle, which is encouraging. So how can you help us, liaise with him so that they see our struggle in the light of we fighting against Franc-Afrique? Thank you.
The how part, I think, is very important. Again, sometimes, to articulate a unified statement of the Cameroonian people, that in itself is a struggle, and I'm sure you can appreciate that, arriving at a kind of common position, finding common ground. Part of that is, the sort of the art of negotiations, Doctor. So the how part, I think, what is critical, the best answer is, how do Cameroonians come together, create the basis, find the common ground, articulate that common ground, so that when you are speaking to the rest of the world, you can say, we the people of Cameroon, this is our sort of vision, this is our strategy, this is our demands. I think for me, and the question is whether you've arrived at that point. This is something I was talking with Derek, Comrade Derek, and that is, when, if your struggles, same, the idea of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa, the word united was part of that, was the countervailing force against those who wanted to split our country. In Palestine, Israel, they talk about two-state solution. Here, I can tell you, Lucas Mangope wanted Bophuthatswana to be an independent. The apartheid system created Transkei, Bophuthatswana, KZN, all these homelands, the Bantustans, and they were talking about Southern Africa being a constellation of states. So the unity, and of course, there were many who supported the breakup of South Africa. So I think for me, I don't know about the situation in Cameroon. I cannot speak, but if there's the how part, when people see Cameroon and the voice of Cameroon as a united voice, I think for me, 50% or 60% of your battle is won, Doctor. And the question is how to arrive at that point is through engagement. Yeah, it was. You have to we used to call it democratic persuasion. Something that you have to speak to and win over the support of those who may not necessarily be your natural allies. How can it be that 33 unions, it takes them four years of unity talks to create a federation? That tells you that these things are never easy. So yeah, it's hard work, it's painstaking work, it's work where you can have the leaders who can listen. So when people feel that they are being listened to, they are more likely to participate in a kind of democratic sort of consensus building process. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but certainly I
Yes.
think you
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have the
good.
wherewithal to say what would be the consensus, where do we find, what would a common ground look like in the context of Cameroon?
Okay.
Yes, that's good. That's
Thank
good.
you, Gino. So before we take Milton, there are two comrades who have wanted to ask questions. They are unable to put up their hands. So we have Comrade Raymond and then Comrade Dabney in that order, and then we'll get to Comrade Milton.
Comrade Derek, just give me a point of privilege to jump in before the two comrades come in.
Oh, okay.
And the point of privilege, I think it's for the House and equally for Gino to say, we're learning a lot and thank you so much. But there will be a need for a second meeting.
Yeah.
We will commit to provide some very critical background information, but keeping it within 30 seconds. The context of the struggle, given the Southern African case, is, for argument's sake, the UN forcing Namibia and South Africa to become a country, and Namibians are treated as second-class citizens, and they decided we want to get our own country back as it originally was. And South Africa, as a bigger country, says you remain our slaves. I'll leave it at that. That's really the context. So in terms of our conversation, we are not talking of uniting. We are talking of an independent entity forced into a union that is going out. And that's where we all come from as Ambazonia, the English part of Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you for that with that context, Comrade Milton. So we'll take Ray and then Comrade Dabney's questions, and then back to Gino. Ray. Raymond. Comrade Dabney, if you are there, maybe you should take the mic.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Derek, and thank you, comrades, for those wonderful questions. And I also want to thank Gino so much for really giving us, the history of the ANC struggle to liberate South Africa. And one of the things I wanted to point out was just what Comrade Milton just said. And I think it will be important that we can share a lot of information with you to understand where we are coming from and why our revolution is on and has and now translated into a genocidal war, which is going on now in our territory. So I think with that background, I'll ask this question, because we're looking at strategies, and there were the 4 pillars that the ANC put in place, which you outlined very clearly. We are at war. I will not talk about the issue of armed struggle, but I just want to talk about 2 things. which has really, because on the issue of international solidarity, Comrade Milton already pointed out, the failure of these institutions to live up to their mandate as institutions. And so I will not want to visit that, but I want to talk about the other two, which is about build on the ground and mass mobilization. And I want to use present technology because when I look at the time that the ANC was fighting for the liberation of South Africa, we didn't have much technology that we have today. And as a result of the advent of technology, it affects the issue of building on the ground. Because in my point of view, strategies have to be on the ground. And in listing those 4 pillars, which you said you only knew about them after a while, after a very long time. But today, in modern day revolution, everybody has a microphone, we have a social media, and yes, in some cases, mobilization it goes, well, using social media, but in a case like ours, that I think when you get more information, especially in the terms of leadership, some leadership, and the question that our brother asked about leadership, which you answered very well, some of us consider that some of the leaders have betrayed the people. So in that case, it has affected the issue of building on the ground because of the lack of trust. So in today's revolution, how do you build on the ground with everybody on the microphone and everybody wants to know all? And so what can you advise us in building on the ground?
Definitely, I think you're right. People think that because, it's so access. I was just thinking about Derek and our communications, how easy. In the old days, we would have had to send a telegram or a letter, to convene a meeting like this, right? How quickly, and with everyone dispersed across the world, how easy. So, yeah, in a sense, the technology that exists today allows these things. But also remember that it also gives the enemy the same access to the technology, So the question of people power, when you look at that, the question is, who is able to, what I know, if you take, Trump, Musk, and so on, right? These guys, they have access to technology. They, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they can tweet. And when they tweet something, and I'm not on social media, the only social media I'm on is on WhatsApp, and I think LinkedIn. And the only reason why I'm on LinkedIn is because there's a former comrade of mine who insisted. He did my LinkedIn profile for me, not myself. So the thing about these people is that they can say something on the Twitter or X, and what happens is that the media carries it. When I watch Al Jazeera, constantly Al Jazeera, they know that the Israeli government lies, that there's a propaganda machinery that's behind, what they're doing. But they need an effective propaganda machinery because the brutality that they are engaged in is so horrendous that they need to keep creating the diversions. So they also use the tools that we have. They use it against us, So I think for me, the issue of social media and having technology, access to the technology, yeah, it works both ways, both for and against. The important thing to answer your question, how is your network on the ground? And if you are in exile, if you like, and if you are working outside in the diaspora, then it's important, very important. And what I was trying to say internally is that the circuit breaker, like in electricity, like in your home, all the rooms are wired and there's a board there. If you put one switch down, you break the circuit, or you put the main switch off, the circuit is not working. I think it's important to consider what is your communication circuit, and to what extent, are you in touch and in tune with people on the ground? And people on the ground are in touch and in tune with yourselves in exile. That for me is the kind of circuit breaker in Devni. And that comes in, it comes with overt organizations. It comes, yeah, I understand when you're speaking about the underground. Yeah, the underground is unforeseen. The underground is only for your benefit. The enemy must never know that they exist in underground. And that underground is multifaceted, right? It's in the community, it's in the workplace, it's in the universities. It might even be inside government, but that's the one thing. But people know that if something happens inside Cameroon, if somebody is arrested and so on, that they immediately know that the communication will kick in such a way that at the global level, people will know immediately, so that's, I think, is the kind of network that needs to be built. All of these things are not working in isolation, the underground, the diaspora, the sort of the formal organizations inside the country that you have, and then of course your communication with all your allies, both inside the country, in the region, and of course globally. I think for me that is the critical, and the extent to which you can map that, without sharing it too much with the enemy. But if you can map that and you say we have a good network and a good communication strategy, and I think 40, 50% of your battle is won, because you are a force to be reckoned with. And people know that if something happens, there will be a kind of corresponding reaction, if you like, in solidarity. Then they know they will take you seriously. One of the things I used to say, we never went to an employer before we had majority membership of the union. It's only after, when we had majority, and a good majority, a solid, then we went to the employer and said, listen, we represent the majority of the workers, we deserve these rights, and therefore we want to sit down and negotiate with you, So the thing is, and when you do that, they will take you seriously. When you are strong and they know you are organized, then they will, kind of listen to you. And that is the long and the short. So yeah, and and the thing about having follow-up discussions, absolutely. I was saying to Derek, it would be so nice if we could meet in person, break some bread, have a chat, and then of course there are many others. There's another network that could be in place so that you are able to educate others, beyond me, that is, on the struggles of the Cameroonian people. Right.
Awesome. So, Comrade Gino, thank you very much for the way you have taken the questions. Just I wanted to input, because me and you, we have had a bit of chat before. So I've learned listening to you and podcast, interact, and all of that. The lifeline of a revolution being the bread and butter struggles of the people on the ground was very important in your days of organizing, and what legitimizes the struggle. Something I want you to talk a little bit more about, organizing those little struggles of the people, so that people keep demanding, what is rightfully theirs, that can connect with other struggles from around the world and be echoed, which puts the appetite of the oppressor under pressure, whether it's through their corporations or the regime itself. It puts them under pressure. But the people on the ground stand for that kind of organizing because it speaks to their bread and butter. That is very important. And it's something that I feel we haven't strategically managed after since 2016 and 2017. We haven't managed the people on the ground and empower them with some sort of underground, so that bread and butter issues continue. Like we have we have the teachers union, we have the lawyers union, we have the drivers association, we have different sorts of unions, and the regime has made sure over the years that they dilute the organizing power of those unions. And I think as activists, we have ought to, keep empowering whatever is left of the unions to understand that the bread and butter issues are something that they must keep, pushing out there, and we are supporting them covertly, and they don't see it as part of the struggle, but it puts the regime or the oppressor, kind of like pushes them to the wall to make mistakes and all of that. So that's something that I picked up in our conversation, which I wanted to just highlight with the comrades. Then, as we are in the diaspora, you talked to me about the switch, the connections. I've been telling our comrades, which is based on a lot of reading and engagement with comrades like yourself, that we need to first of all organize in communities where we are located, because like you said, the technology, it's a double-edged sword. Where it works in our favor, sometimes it would also work in the favor of the oppressor, and there's easy infiltration. But organizing through communities where we are located in the diaspora, and also tackling the issues in those communities, it enables us to infiltrate the social justice movement in terms of advocacy, local organizations, which helps us, have the microphone to share our issues back at home or our issues in those communities, which is something that we are also missing. So probably when Raymond asks his questions, just putting through this background context, you will help us connect some of those links, how advocacy works, how networking, in advocacy works when we are building alliances, finding solidarity partners, getting to know people. Like me and you, we met in another forum, which was put together for organizing, like things like that, and how we can use and leverage those spaces. So Conrad Raymond had a question he would ask, but I just wanted to fill in those filters, Gino, so that when you respond, you have a little bit of that context. Thanks. Ray.
All right. Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Comrade Gino, for affording us this opportunity to have this conversation. I think my question ties a little bit with what Dr. Agua asked earlier on. Like the Amazonian revolution has been going on for nearly 9 years, and yet the South African government has yet to take an official position on the matter. We are not necessarily asking for their endorsement of our struggle for liberation, but at the least, we expect a clear condemnation of the human rights violations committed by the Cameroonian government. And despite holding numerous briefing sessions with the ANC and various South African entities, we have yet to see any public statement. Their silence is kind of concerning. We are left wondering what we're doing wrong, or what the underlying issues might be preventing the South African government from speaking out. Now, my question is, most importantly, what additional steps can we take to prompt them not only to break their silence, but also to play a constructive role as a mediator between both parties? Because I think South Africa has a very pivotal role to play in Africa, and of course they can be very pivotal in brokering a kind of a deal between the Amazonian liberation and the Cameroonian government. Thank you.
Thank you. Gino, before you respond, I think Milton would throw in a little bit more context. But also, Gino, another point that I failed to underline was you mentioned that in the structures of the liberation struggle throughout the term, leadership was earned. You talked a lot about leadership being earned, whether at community level, based on the persons organizing, even at international level, leadership was earned. Maybe when you respond or you give closing remarks, you should speak to that, because I think that is something that is missing in our revolution, and I don't really see people earning leadership. Leadership in our revolution seems to be the person with the loudest mic, uh, not really earning. So Milton would give a little bit of context, and then Raymond has asked a very important question, which I think it would be driving home, like what we need to be doing now in South Africa, in other countries that we have communities to get the attention of officials, official organizations, and things like that.
No, no, I just say, all these are just brilliant questions. I can think about, you're sitting like if you are sitting in a formal kind of executive meeting and you are thinking about strategy and tactics, all of these questions would be the kind of issues you'll be spending hours deliberating on. I just want to pick up on how, when you speak about the how, one of the things is that if it wasn't for Comrade Derek on a very important sort of a network that I was recently introduced by. And Comrade Derek, just so that you know, there's a man in that APRIA a group called Dr. Richard Steele. Now, Richard Steele in the 80s, he was in Durban, and he was the first young white man to refuse to serve in the apartheid army. They put him in jail. I mean, they messed him up, but he refused to serve in the apartheid army. The first person is in that group. And his refusal, even though they jailed him, court-martialed him and jailed him and so on, his refusal to serve in the apartheid army led to the formation of N conscription campaign. I just thought, so when he sort of included me in that group, I felt I was very privileged. And what you did a few days ago, asking, you asked a very important question. And I was able to respond because I could feel your pain. What more you need to do is the same, as comrades have been asking. The thing is, you just have to go. You must never, ever become despondent. I was speaking about the Alex Ferguson, the Manchester United coach. His philosophy is never give in, never give up. Same, under apartheid, there were times and really, really we thought, we lost, we felt defeated, but we will go and hide ourselves somewhere in the township, sit around while the police were doing their thing, arresting people, picking up people, threatening people, and so on. The question was, after we get really despondent and despair, then we would find what's next. So we found the way of just keep continuing, and that's what you have to do. If you believe in your struggle, then you keep going, because this is not a sprint. You have to be in it for the long haul. And part of, this generation, if you don't do it, you create the basis for the next generation, right? And each generation has its calling, and you are taking up, the kind of the cudgels on behalf of the current generation, right? And of course, in 10, 15 years' time, when you are much older, there'll be others that will follow in your footsteps, And the thing about, Shufri was asking the question here, the issue, Shufri, you speak about the narrative, other than the discussion that I had with Comrade Derek, the only other time that I recall reading about the struggles of English-speaking Cameroonians was through the work of Amnesty International. So I'm associated with Amnesty in different ways, but I'm no longer sort of working for them. But whenever Amnesty comes with the human rights, the global state of human rights reports, obviously I'll go and look at what's happening in particular countries. And that's where I came across what was happening inside Cameroons and the persecution of people that are, from the northern part and those that are speaking English and so on, And the thing about it is, if you are able to construct the narrative, and the narrative is an articulation of, let's call it, the will of the people, then I think, that is the importance. And you are able to build and shape, as you say, the narrative and win support for that narrative. That's what you have to do. And the more consistent you are, you will find, the more you will start to gather people that are standing in solidarity and behind that particular narrative, whatever the demand is. So all I can say, how, is that you just keep going. And all of these things, I'm hoping that even this meeting would lead to something where even those of us that are based inside South Africa, we can have like a follow-up, have all of you back in the room, and then we start linking with other people that could be, in a sense, sort of coming and joining, if you like, your omnibus. The ANC, as they said, it was an omnibus. It was neither communist nor was it capitalist, you know. It was kind of middle of the road. And the ANC omnibus, people kept jumping in, and when they sort of, finished their journey, they jumped out, others would join in. That's the kind of the philosophy of and the metaphor that I'd like to use, and in the context of a struggle, the last learning, if you like, in the art of war, Sun Tzu says, know thy enemy, but above all, know thyself. And when you're speaking about divisions, be careful that you're not perpetuating those divisions. But part of what you are doing is that you are creating the basis for people who supposedly are divided, but coming together and using the methodology of seeking common ground. Because then, we, not all of us, I mean, I can say, even though, I qualify to be a veteran of the ANC, I'm also disappointed with how the movement, it was a movement, but the movement that got, in a sense, captured and controlled by the party bureaucracy. So therefore, a movement is people inside the party bureaucracy, but they are also everywhere else. They don't have to be inside a branch in the formal structures of the ANC. But if you look at the ANC has become something, it's a shadow of its former self because the bureaucracy has taken over the movement, as it were. And this is something that happened in 1997, if you were from a township in the ANC, and let's say you were part of the Tembisa branch of the ANC, everyone will recognize you as coming from Tembisa, and people in Tembisa were very active in the 80s. They have a tradition of militant struggles. But what the ANC did is that they restructured all the branches and so on, so that they could sort of be aligned with the ward, the political demarcations, the ward structures, and it became, Ward 118 of Tembisa. People lost their identity, and once you lose your identity, an important identity where people could recognize you, that is the beginning of the end. I'm sorry to say that, but identity, the narrative, all of those things, people know exactly who you are and what you stand for, and they believe in your cause. So yeah, know thy enemy, but above all, know thyself.
No,
I
thank
always
you.
preach that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gino. I hope as we start organizing those internal workshops, I know that you have led a lot of, workshops, strategy workshops. Hopefully, you will be one of those leaders who would step in one of those workshops when we are leading specific workshops on identifying probably struggles on the ground, struggles in the various communities in the diaspora that we can, be advocating or articulating so that we mobilize around those struggles. Because the critical thing is to organize in the way the people, the population is aligned with those struggles so that they can come together and then we can talk the politics, or they can see that they are part of the politics because they are also victims. So, Gino, I know that we just crossed over the 90-minute mark. So, in rounding up, what I don't know how much time you have left, but the things that I wanted us to discuss in rounding up is probably how we would go from here, organizing the next sessions. Probably there are some leaders in the advocacy space or social justice movement that you think we need to also listen to them and their journeys. When I listen to Troublemakers podcast, I hear, some great voices who have really walked some journeys. And if you know some of those and you want to introduce them to our struggle, maybe by email or on WhatsApp, or we have a call, please always do. The email thread that we started in some of the in there, some of the comrades can ask questions, you know, and you respond. Or when you come up with the reading material resources, I know that when you train young activists, you share resources, documentaries that they should watch, and all of that. That is a good place for you to share with us. And as we digest those materials, we will now be, you know, re-educating our people and activists, especially on the things that needs to be done. Then me and you, I know we pondered. You said there's a great deal of veterans in the forum that we are in. So maybe after this, within the week, me and you, we can engage and find a way to introduce, you know, you introducing our struggle to the forum and maybe calling for a discussion, a virtual meeting like this for people who want to listen, where we can now have a few of our comrades maybe present like an overview of the struggle. A few of us share our personal journeys. Then maybe some of those veterans, you know, and leaders in their own rights would pick interest, like yourself, and it will give us an opportunity to get more people who have traveled the journey to give lectures like your own and engage with us and probably open up to networks. The last thoughts that I wanted you to share was the advocacy networks. I know that you are part of the core. You are very humble, but you are the part of the team that brought amnesty to Africa as a whole. You don't talk about those things, but I think it's a big deal, you know. And right now you are part of Aid International. So, and I know that there's that organizing that you do where you bring activists from across the world to Tanzania for a meeting where they come and discuss struggles and discuss solidarity action and things like that. So in closing, I would like you to highlight some of those actions, and talk to some commitments to some of the things that I've mentioned, what's possible, what can be done. I would let you to take a step at that.
Thank you, Comrade Derek. You know that the producer of the Troublemakers podcast is in the group, in the Apria group.
I thought as much.
I don't know what sort of pseudonym he goes under, but he's in that group. And certainly, what I think would be great is that if I could get him and connected with you, and then you could put a kind of sort of a group together and work on a podcast with him, because I think that'll be wonderful. It's another way of you telling your story. The other possibility I was just thinking is that I don't know if it is it Milton also that is in Johannesburg. If there's a group of people, yeah, if there's a group in the group, if there's anyone from Johannesburg, we can connect, right? And we can set up. I'll be going to the ActionAid Global Assembly in a couple of weeks, and then from there, I've got another week in 1st of July. But certainly after that, we can arrange like a little meal together at my place in the network. And then the last thing I was thinking about, that Cameroon will form part of the West Africa region of Amnesty. And I wanted to just check, Derek, have you got sort of contact with, sort of some of the the Amnesty is documenting the human rights violations in Cameroon, right? I wanted to just check if you've got connections with people in Amnesty West Africa. They are based in Dakar, Senegal. You have?
Yeah, we don't have like some of our comrades have, been in communications with them, but we haven't had, an official channel where we engage with them, on some of their reports and sorts of. So it's definitely a link that we would welcome that introduction, and we would, start engaging with them, on some of their reports, some of the things that, like I said in the other meeting, at times we feel like some of these international organizations, they are victim shaming, because when non-state armed groups who are basically defending their communities commit a crime, it's a human rights it's a crime, and should be condemned. But when government forces who are trained and that government is signed up to the Geneva Convention and all of that go and burn down villages, burn down people, torture students, torture lawyers, and all of that. Those are violations of international rights that they have violated, and there is need for those organizations to see that the government is an organization that is signed up to these international treaties, and that's violations. Violations are worse than somebody who is just because they are angry because their village was burned down and they go into the bush and fighting. You cannot equate that person, what they do as mistakes, to what a state that is signed up to international treaties does. So those are the things that make us kind of fight with organizations like Amnesty at times. But now we understand the importance of advocacy action, but we like to have channels where we can engage with them on some of those things. I mean, it's been 9 years, it's close to 9 years that our struggle has been, and we have, had to self-study some of those things, and we understand some of those things. So we would like, those channels, open channels, so that we engage them, so that they also see that we are not the enemy, we are just victims, and we are just hoping that, what they do brings dignity to our people, not just at the end of the day, probably serve whatever their sponsorship is coming from and all of that. So yeah, thank you. Me and you will engage and we'll see how we can open up those chat forums. The comrades in Johannesburg, I'm sure they would love to come for some biryani. They would love to come for some biryani at your place and have a chat, So, comrades, we went past the 90-minute mark. I would want somebody to just, maybe if Gino has a word, he would say that, and then I would let Comrade Milton just do a closing remark. We have the email thread. The people who are not on the emails, please, if you can WhatsApp me your emails, I'll add you to the conversation. We will have a continuous conversation and engagement with Gino. He would introduce us to, the organizations or the people that he feels we need to have conversations with as things progress. Gino, if there's some closing remarks from your end, and then Comrade Milton would give a closing remark, just so we don't go. We are already almost 15 minutes over time.
Yeah. No, thank you, Comrade Derek. I have nothing much to add. I just hope everything I said was of use to the comrades, in the room. Yeah, I'm not. I'm just an. I must repeat this, Comrade Derek. I've always had my feet on the ground. I never looked. Sort of beyond where I was. And whatever we did, never. Never. Yeah. Never sought the limelight or anything like that. What I'm hoping that, small things like what you did in the group, right? And if you look at even in the context of that group of the Africa Peace and Research Association, even there, that this is a spin-off of that. I'm hoping that this could also lead to a spin-off, with other comrades, had a few years back, comrade. But I think what is important is to link up, and my recommendation, Derek, is that where we can do like a mapping of which are the civil society organizations inside South Africa that you are already connected to. We can look at who you need to connect to, and then those who are in South Africa, we can start building the circuit breaker, as it were, so that you are building the right kind of sort of collaborations and connections with comrades here. That's, I think, can be a useful kind of follow through from that. And I'm very, very happy to assist comrades in doing that, Derek, and of course continue the discussions with you. So yeah, thank you so much, really. I'm so happy. I hope one day we will meet in person, but yeah, this is a kind of good start. Thank you so much, really. It has been a real privilege for me to be in your company.
Thank you, Gino. Thank you. Comrade Milton, just closing remarks from your end, please.
Comrade Gino, this has been refreshing. I've been trying to look at the right English word to express just how happy we are as a community. It's been very enlightening. Without probably getting the fundamentals of our struggle, you have answered so many questions. We can see light in so many ways. We can see answers in so many things we've been trying to do. And we're very hopeful that us meeting you through Derek was not by accident. Thank you so much for the time, for the insight. And we're really looking forward to the different solidarity platforms you would link us up with, because for us, this is the first time we really part of a revolution of this magnitude. And I remember very well that in 2016, 2017, many of us thought this was going to take 1 year. This must make you laugh, you know, right? We're now in its 9th year, and now we understand what the struggle is better. So in itself, it's a university. And to our comrades who sacrificed the time to be part of this very insightful meeting this morning, I have no doubt that this has been great value to you. Thank you very much for the sacrifices. I think we've learned better now that you have to liberate yourself and get others to support you. Nobody would liberate you. We look forward to our next engagement, and thank you so much. Blessed day, everybody. And Derek, thank you and thank you and thank you for being the Indian behind this. Very grateful. Gino, I am in Johannesburg and definitely will come for Brian and let's so that we can have our notebooks as well and learn a lot. Thank you.
No, we
Thank
do
you.
Chisanyama, Milton.
Yeah.
Don't
Thank
worry,
you.
not Brian.
Yeah.
I can't
So
forget
just
Brian,
before we
but
go,
I can make you a nice Chisanyama.
I would love that.
just before we leave, comrades, I just wanted to say one of our comrades who passed on over the weekend, Patrick Vega, who was like a senior brother to me, is really the brain behind this. Like for the past 7 years, he has said, we need to learn about struggle. We need to learn activism. We need to connect with the social justice movement. And after singing to me for so long, I finally understood what he meant. And me and him, we started this process, which has led to this, first lecture. We hope that we'll get so many of the lectures. But unfortunately, over the weekend, we lost him because he has been sick for the last few years. And as his body lay, I think that one of the things that I wanted to just do in this meeting was just to tell the comrades that let's have a minute of silence, a prayer for the brother in our hearts, and just so that wherever he is, he should know that the work that he inspired, is starting to take off in the direction that he envisioned, and we will continue in that path. So it would be a minute of silence, and then I will just say amen, and anybody can then say their own prayer for Patrick in their own place where they are. So that would be the end of it from my end. So a minute of silence for our comrade Patrick.
Comrade Derek, before we go into that, have they come up with the burial arrangements? Because we only heard about it. We're in Joburg. We don't have any details as to that.
We're waiting for the family to officiate an arrangement, and then we will make it public to our people to see how they participate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so a minute of silence for our comrade, and then I would say amen, and then that will be the end of it. Amen. And may the soul of our comrade Patrick rest in peace. Thank you so much.
Amen. 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 Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right, comrades, we'll continue with the conversation on the email thread. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, comrade Derek. Thank you, comrades.
Yeah. Okay, comrades.
Thank
have a good week.
you.